Okay, so we're going to talk about how to put a quadratic function into vertex form. And we're going to start with an example where a equals 1. So that means this leading coefficient is 1 here, and that makes it a little bit simpler to talk about. Okay, so we'll try that first. All right, so step 1 in the notes that you have copied into your notebook already, hopefully, or that you have in a handout, is to subtract the constant from both sides. So we want this equation, to step back for a second, to look like this. So we need the x to be inside of a parentheses and be squared. So we're looking to factor this so that basically we want to complete the square with this equation. So that's what we're basically doing. We're going to subtract the constant for step 1. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So that's y minus 3 equals x squared minus 8x. So I've subtracted 3 from one side. Because I've subtracted 3 from the other side, this equal sign is still true. This y minus 3 is equal to this. Step 2, you're going to factor out a. Well, a is just 1, so there's nothing to factor out. So we can, step 1 is done. Step 2, we don't need to do. Step 3, find the missing number in the parentheses to complete the square. So basically, I need to complete the square on this side. So I need this. I need to add a number here. And then if I add something on that side, I need to add the same number on this side. And the number that I add here has to make it so that I can do step 4, which is that this side over here has to be a parentheses and a parentheses where these two parentheses are exactly the same number. These two numbers are exactly the same, okay? So the hint for step 3 is that you're going to take b, which is this term here, so b equals -8, take half of that, so half of b equals -4, and then take that number and square it. So take half of b and square it, so -4 squared is positive 16. So that's the number I'm going to add to both sides. Okay, so that's step 3. Now, step 4 is to rewrite the right side as something times something in a square fashion. So basically, I'm going to factor this side, which is x times x to get x squared, and I need two numbers here that add to -8x, so it's going to be -4 and -4. So they add to -8 and they have to multiply to positive 16. So -4 times -4 is positive 16. This is the correct factor. I need to write it as x minus 4 parentheses squared. And on this side, I have y minus 3 plus 16. Okay. If I were to go backwards for just one moment, so you don't need to understand this to do the steps, but if you want to know why I added half b squared, I'm going to go over this another way, which is to think about what I'm doing here one step in advance. So let's say that I had x squared minus 8x, and I was thinking about what to add on this side, and I didn't know yet what it was. I hadn't done this math yet. I know that eventually I want it to look like this. So I know that to multiply to x squared, this has to be x and x. Usually then I would find the two numbers here that multiply to that last term. But they haven't given me that term yet. I don't know what it is yet. So I know that I need two things that multiply to this and add to -4. Well, I do have the b term here. So I know that I'm looking for two numbers that add to -8. And I know that they have to be the exact same number. Well, the only way it's going to be the exact same number and add to 8 is if it's exactly half. So that's why I'm going to take half of this of b, which is half of -8, and that's going to be -4. And if I take -4 and -4 here, they're going to add to the correct number. And when I multiply them, I'm going to get 16, which is this number, half of -8 squared, so -4 squared. And that's why the formula is always going to be half of the middle term, and then take that answer and square it. And notice that if I do that, these two parentheses will end up looking exactly the same, which is what we wanted. So that was our little side explanation. All right, so go back to the regular steps. So step 4 was rewrite it as x minus 4 squared, which we did. Step 5 is to simplify the left side. So I'm going to take y minus 3 plus 16, add these two terms. I get y plus 13. Now this right here counts as vertex form for some people. So that would work in some textbooks. However, I do want step 6. So the way that we want it is we want the y to be isolated on the left. We're going to subtract 13 from both sides for step 6. And that's going to be x minus 4 parentheses squared minus 13. This is our vertex form right here that we're going to use. Call that vertex form of the quadratic function. Because I can now tell the exact vertex right away from looking at this function. It's going to be that number, but with the opposite sign, so not negative 4, but positive, and then comma negative 13 is the vertex. Now, why don't you go ahead and try putting the following into vertex form? So why don't you try example 2, which is y equals x squared minus 5x plus 1.2 on your own. And then watch the next video to make sure you've done it correct.